My room is a mess because I am a mess, and that is simply where we are. Hello, my name is Gabby. I am a freelance artist. So introducing myself to literally any of my platforms is so stressful because I don't know who I'm supposed to be. Wow, we are off to a great start. I am an actor, dancer, writer, photographer, and sometimes podcaster, and I guess wannabe YouTuber. I have started recently recording my podcast in a visual sense as well, so I don't know if you are watching this or listening to it, but either way, I'm really glad that you're here in this imaginary, liminal, real but not real space. Great. Today I'm going to be reading an old Substack post that I made. That's basically the way in which I do these now, is I write something and then I read it to you. I never graduated college, which is honestly a shame because I love writing papers. I love presenting. I love a project. So I've given myself homework, which is to try and make sense of the world and myself in the world. So we're looking backward today. Backwards. We're living in the past is all I'm trying to say. This piece is called Get Out the Map, which is the name of an Indigo Girls song that I absolutely love and cherish, that indirectly inspired this piece. Glasses on. Here we go. I recall that I once walked down to the end of the driveway at my childhood home with a laundry basket full of an 8-year-old's necessities, likely a Bible, an American Girl doll, and some clothes for me and the doll. As is the case for most kids who plan to run away, I did not make it past the end of the driveway, and I do not recall what inclined me to leave. I'm sure it was nothing. I do, however, believe that I was, in a small way, foreshadowing a trend of my late teens and early 20s in which I learned I was capable of taking solo trips. This was not a common practice amongst my friends, so by 22 I had made a name for myself as Gabby, the girl on the go. I took pride in that title and made it a mission to uphold and maintain it. But it wasn't a 24-hour New York trip or a stroll to the end of my driveway that sparked this exploration. My nerve for chasing and escaping began when I showed up at my ex-boyfriend's house in the middle of the night, the first time. I regret to report that there were other times. I'm still sorry. It was late autumn during my freshman year of college. We had broken up just before school began, and we were actually 2 or so months into what would turn out to be one of many breakups, but at the time it was the loneliest and most heartbroken I'd ever felt in my life. I spent weeks brooding, being sad, being regretful. I listened to breakup songs. I sulked. I spent many a night watching the sunset in my car in the Kroger parking lot. I spent a lot of time asking God what to do. Finally, late one weekday night, I arrived somewhere past the point of feeling sad about the situation and instead frustrated that it wasn't changing. I was restless enough to get out of my bed and into my car. I said nothing to my roommate, who, mind you, was mere feet apart from me asleep in her own bed, and I wasn't even sure he'd be home. We weren't speaking. But nevertheless, I typed an address into Apple Maps from memory and drove. My school was something like 2.5 hours from the place my best guess told me he'd be staying. Like a maniac, I listened to the same song on repeat for the entire 2.5 hours. That song was Do It Again by Hillsong Worship. I blamed God for the instinct to go on this trip. I did not text him and tell him I was coming. My roommate, bless her, did eventually text me, something along the lines of, "I love you, be careful, she's the best, shout out Tori. Listen and drive, listen and drive." This was my unsung mantra. When I arrived, I parked on the street at the end of the driveway. I did not see his car, but I decided to wait. And as fate would have it, eventually the car I knew well rolled past me and into the driveway. His eyes widened as he recognized that I was me, and then like a dream, he was opening my passenger door and joining me in the front seat. What was I doing there, he asked. I had gone all that way, I told him, so that I could tell him that I would wait for him forever. I told him that I was not asking him to take me back, and I was not expecting to leave that night with a boyfriend again, but I wanted him to know that I would be there when he was ready, if he ever was. That I would wait forever if I had to, because I knew in my heart we were meant to be together. It was your textbook first love monologue, one that I hadn't planned but was coming from the heart. I believe his response was, "Okay." And then we hugged. It was a very long hug. His verbal assurance had only gone so far as okay. I remember feeling his hand against my back and thinking to myself, he's still mine. I was 18 then. I wrote this at 25, sitting outside of a coffee shop in a town about an hour outside of Atlanta that I had chosen as my hiding spot for the day. At 18, and even the couple of years that followed, I called that night passionate and romantic. I would have died on the hill that God was calling me to drive to him and tell him those things. I would have said something about how that night taught me to trust God and that it's important to follow your heart. What I recognize at 26 reading this now is that night taught me about my power and the degree to which I might be able to start yielding it. It proved to me that I was allowed to choose what I wanted to do. It gave me a false sense of control at a time in my life where I felt I had control over nothing. It made me feel as though my presence alone was meaningful to some extent, that I could show up somewhere and something could happen. So much of what I have longed for thus far in my life has had to do with wanting to just really be somewhere, hoping that someday something would happen that would make me feel like I matter instead of feeling like a stranger in my own life. I wrote this like a year ago, I think, and it's funny because today I feel exactly the same. Anyways, back to the story. While I did get back together with my boyfriend some weeks after that night, it ultimately had minimal effect on the endurance of our relationship. But because of it, I began to fall in love with the sense of possibility that I felt when I got into my car. I felt that same possibility when I stepped onto a plane alone for the first time, which I believe happened sometime after another one of the breakups. The thrill of booking a cheap ticket without asking for permission or validation allowed me to teeter the line of recklessness that I had been taught my whole life to avoid. I've since taken many planes and trains on my own time and dime. I've loaded up my car for a 24-hour beach trip, chased my favorite musicians, covered hundreds of miles just to share a beer with a faraway friend. But like that night at 18, these excursions have almost always been inspired by some level of discomfort and arranged under the guise of, if I can't change what's happening to me, I can at least change where I am while it's happening. So I've chased and I've floundered, and in doing so learned the very boring but true lesson that changing your environment doesn't always change your heart, but sometimes it comes close. Over time, what I've observed about myself through these trips is this. I'm pretty self-sufficient. I am capable of going after what I want. I can spend my time alone in ways that I enjoy. I am decent company to keep. But recognizing that has also shown me that just because I can take care of myself doesn't mean that I should, at least not all the time. Traveling alone has humbled me greatly and proven that exercising power is not a cure for loneliness. It has taught me that heartbreak, desire, and humanness are all a bit more nuanced than they are easy to digest. But with time, I am beginning to accept that nuance. I'm beginning to allow myself grace to take whatever journeys are necessary, even if the journeys seek belonging rather than escape. There are still days when I wake up with a restlessness toward my life and a disdain for every skyscraper and chain restaurant in sight. So every now and then I'll get out the map and I'll swipe around the iPhone app to see what's close but still far enough away. On the day that I wrote this, it wasn't quite warm enough for a lake day, but I saw that LJ sits like only an hour north. I remember the cabin that my great-grandparents had near there when I was growing up. So I zoomed into the city's small downtown to find that there is in fact a coffee shop. And wait, a brewery too? Great, decision made. So after answering a few necessary emails and scarfing down a little breakfast and choosing an outfit for the person I wanted to be that day, I packed my laptop, my notebook, and a few books, and then I got in the car and picked a playlist. Listen and drive. Even though there is much less to run away from now, sometimes I just want to be somewhere else, even if only somewhere small. Being a stranger in the place you live feels lonely, but being a stranger in a place you're visiting carries a little bit of magic and mystery. So I will continue to take these journeys. And as I allow myself to escape every now and then, I will try to remember that it is always within my power to really be somewhere, even here. I have to tell myself that, even here. But I'll also try and give myself a little grace, knowing that sometimes it may take being somewhere else for me to appreciate what that really means. So yeah, there's a couple lines in the song that this is inspired by that say, I'm gonna clear my head. I'm gonna drink that sun. Today it's very cloudy and rainy. My room is a mess. My heart is a mess. But even just like remembering this, reading this kind of took me somewhere else without actually leaving and going somewhere else, because I cannot afford to keep going places. I love going places, but it is expensive and exhausting. Anyways, if you want to read this with your eyes, you can find it on my Substack, which is called Gabby Gabs. You can also listen to this next time if you prefer, if you were watching it, and if you're listening to it this time and you want to watch it next time, I'm going to try to be consistent about putting these on the internet. Like literally, I guess, everywhere. Thank you for listening if you listened, and I'll see you next time. Wow, me personally, I'm just gonna keep drinking the coffee and hope that it works. Okay, bye.